Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Welcome to day 11 of my 2024 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Autumn Days, Balloon Buddies, Bloom and Grow, and Carried Away. So I've stamped those images out on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Simple Stories Happy Hearts collection. So I'll take out the piece that I'm going to use for my color inspiration and tuck that under my cardstock panel. I also stamped 2 additional balloons that I'm going to use to cover up 2 of the balloons in the cluster. One I tried to stamp a whole bunch of hearts on and just didn't like the look of it, and the other one I thought would just add some fun dimension to the card. So I'll be coloring those off to the side, and I will be using my Copic markers. So I'm actually going to start with the girl's skin. I'm going to use E000, E00, and E11 for her, starting with that E11 up under the brim of her hat, on her neck where her head would be casting a shadow, and on her hands. And then I'm going to blend that out with the E00 and fill in her hands since they're super small, but I will use that E000 to add a nice highlight down on the lower part of her face and on her neck. And I did decide to do a second layer on there. I just wanted it to be a bit more intense, and also I wanted to add a tiny shadow next to her nose that I forgot to do the first time around, so I went ahead and did that on my second layer. Then I'll move on to her hair, and I'm going to use some E50s. I love using the E50s for hair because you can really run the range from a really pale blonde to a dark brunette, just depending on which of the colors you use and how you layer them up. I'm going to go a little bit on the lighter end, kind of like a dark blonde to a very light brown. So I'm using E50, E51, E53, and E55. If you've been following my channel for a while, you know that I prefer to color darkest to lightest, except when it comes to hair. Hair is the one time when I like to start with my lightest colors and kind of map out where the darkest colors are going to go. That way I can kind of gauge how dark or light I want to take it. So it's always easy to add in darker colors, but it's very difficult to take them away. So that's why I just start light with the hair. So I laid in the E50 and then built my way up, adding in color all the way up to the E55, adding that darkest color under the hat brim, right where the ponytail is tied on the side, below her ear, anything like that. And then I work my way back down in the reverse. For her little boots, I decided to keep in those brown tones, but I'm going to darken them up. I added in the E57, blended out with the E55, and then use the E53 for the highlight. And I'm also going to use these shades for my tree, but this time I'm going to switch to the 3 lightest shades, starting with the E53 to lay in some shadows, a little bit thicker on the right hand side since the tree is going to go on the right hand side of the card, but also adding a little shadow on the left so that it looks rounded. And then I'll blend that out with the E51 and use the E50 down the center. So that way I got all these different tones of brown just by using different shades in that same family. I also added in rosy cheeks with RV10 and RV11, and I will add those to my bluebird as well. Well, I'm making it a bluebird. You could actually color this little bird to be any type that you'd like. But I'm going to pull out some of those turquoises from that pattern paper. I'm going to use BG10, BG11, and BG13, starting with the BG13 to lay in my shadows on the top of the head, the base of the wings, the base of the tail, the right side of the body. Then I'll blend that out with the BG11 and add in a little BG10 as well. I didn't fill in the belly completely because I'm going to do that differently because I do want it to look like a bluebird. So I will add in BG quadruple 0, and I'm going to color in the balloons that have the little heart stamped on them. So I wanted to create a Valentine card, but I did want it to be subtle. so that this card could be used for more than just Valentine's Day if I don't end up sending it out for that occasion. So I decided to just do the little heart on some of those balloons to tie in the Valentine's Day theme, but certainly you could use it for other occasions as well. So for those balloons, I started with the BG11, blended out with the BG10, and then used the BG quadruple 0 for the highlight, and also left a little bit of white space for an extra highlight. And I am coloring both the one that I'll be covering up and the one over to the side, because if any of that color would show if you're tipping the card, I just wanted it to be filled in. So I did also color the flowers down at the bottom right corner, but I am going to change those later on in the video, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. For now, I'm going to move on to R000, R01, and R02, and I'm going to do the little girl's dress. So you could do it as a sweater and a skirt if you wanted to, because there is a line drawn there, although there's a little spot where the line is broken up on her skirt. So I thought it could work either way as a dress or a sweater and skirt. I decided to do it as a dress today, and this is just the base layer. I'm going to be adding quite a bit of detail to this later on, so that's why I started with kind of a light colored combo. I did also add a little bit of extra shadow down at the bottom edge of the skirt to try to indicate that the fabric is a little bit ruffled and fluttery around her knees. And so I started with the R02, blended out with the R01, and then used the R000 for the highlight. And I'll also use these shades for the breast on my Bluebird. And I just blended up toward the face with each of those. Again, it wasn't quite dark enough, so I added in a second layer. And then I'm going to do one of the balloons as well. I'm going to do the other balloon that's going to be separate on the card, and then I'll also do the balloon that has the hearts stamped all over it. So I thought I was going to try to do a little extra Valentine design on that balloon and, you know, make it really covered in hearts, but I just didn't like the look of it. Something about it wasn't working for me. So it's great that we have those extra balloons in this set so that you're able to cover things up or create dimension. Next, I wanted to start trying to tie in some of those brighter pinks in the pattern paper. I'm going to use RV13, RV14, and RV17. And I wanted to create a floral pattern on her dress to kind of tie into that pattern paper. So I'm starting with the RV13 and doing some big ovalish blobs all over her dress, which are going to become flowers. I'm going to let those dry for a little bit so that I'll be able to get some definition when I come back and do additional line work. In the meantime, I wanted to color her scarf and her leggings to match. So I brought in RV11, and I'm going to use those lightest 3 shades for both of those. So I put the shadow up under her skirt with the RV14, and on her scarf I did it around the back of her neck, and then I'm blending out with the RV13 and then using the RV11 for the highlight. And I also did color in the ribbon that is tied in her ponytail with those same shades. I wanted that to be a bit more vibrant, so I did go back in and do a second layer. And then now that the flowers have dried long enough on her dress, I can come back in and start to do some details. So I'm going to use the RV14 and just do a couple little circular squiggle marks, and those are going to be the second layer. And then I'll come in with the RV17 and hold my marker a little bit more straight up and down so I can get some thinner lines and add some more little lines until they look like roses. While I have these colors out, I'm also going to do another one of the balloons in the cluster, And I meant to start with the RV14, so I accidentally grabbed the RV17 instead. So this one is a little bit darker than it was originally intended to be, but that's okay. I still think it looks nice, and it definitely still ties in with the pattern paper, so it's all good. But rather than just using 3 shades, I ended up using all 4, just so I was able to get that lighter area of highlight over on the left-hand side. And then I'll also color in the little hearts on the light aqua balloons. And I'm going to use the darkest 3 shades for those. So starting with the RV17 down at the bottom right to match the shading on the rest of the balloon, blending out with the RV14, and then using the RV13 for a highlight on the left side of that heart. Next, I wanted to bring in that kind of corally reddish orange flower in that pattern paper. This was the trickiest one to try to match up with, but I ended up going with R000, R12, and R14. If I could have, I would have used R11 instead of the R000, but my R11 is super dry, so I wasn't able to use it. So this was the next best marker that I had to blend with. I did the flower cluster at the top left, and then also the final balloon in this cluster, starting with the R14, and then blending out with the R12, and then I used the R000 for the highlight. And I did go back and do a second layer on that balloon because I just wasn't happy with the blend. And I also added a little bit of this to the bluebird's belly just to make it a bit more saturated and dark. And then I wanted to add this color onto her dress as well. So I'm just doing little 4-petal flowers, and so it's almost like a little chubby X on her dress. And I'm just scattering those here and there around the fabric so I can try to tie in as many colors in that pattern paper as possible in her dress. I'm not going to do them all because I don't want it to get too overwhelming and, you know, just look like a riot of pattern and color, but I just wanted to tie in nicely. So I'm going to move on to some blues. I decided that to tie in the blue of the background of that pattern paper, I would give her a little denim cap. So I went with B93, B95, B97, and B99. And I'm going to do the bow to match because I wanted the bow to look like it was part of the hat, just to give the hat a little extra detail. So that's why I decided to color it with the denim so it would look like it was made of the same fabric. Although in the end, I kind of wish I had colored it hot pink or something else, but I think the denim still looks cute as well. So for both of those, I started with the B99, blended out with the B97, and then I used the B95, but because that hat was so large and had so much area kind of tipped up toward the light, I decided to use a 4th shade with the B93 for some extra highlight. And then I also used the B95 to add some dots to the center of those little chubby X flowers. And I'm going to do some little berries as well. And this time I switched to the B93 first and just adding in like little trios of dots, or occasionally if I'm running off the edge of the fabric, I just did 2 dots. And then I wanted to darken those up a little bit, so I'm going to jump to the B97 and just add a little extra dot on top of the smaller dot. And then I felt like that blue didn't fit in with the rest of the scene, so I decided to change those flowers at the bottom right and make those blue as well. But I wanted to go just slightly softer, so I brought in the B91 and use the B93 and the B95 to color right over the light blue I had already done. Then for the greens, to match the green in that pattern paper, I used YG21 and YG25. I'm going to do the leaves on the flowers and also the centers of the blue flowers because I didn't want to bring in yellow or something else. And then I'll also do the leaves on the tree. Just starting with the YG25 and blending out with the YG21. And then I also wanted to add some leaves on her dress to fit with the flowers. So I started with the YG21 and just kind of put in little, almost like an almond shape there. And then I went over that with the YG25 to add some veining to the leaves. Although it wasn't quite dark enough, it really wasn't showing up on the color of her dress. So I decided to pull in G46 as well and just added like a little line to the center of each of those leaves. And then I added one extra leaf in there as well because I felt like there was just needed another pop of green. And then I'm going to grab my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and get that going off to the side. I'll go over the eyes of my girl and my bird to make them nice and bright and shiny, and then trim these images out with their matching dies. For my background, I'm starting with a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock that I trimmed down with one of the Hello Bluebird Nesting Decal A2 dies. And I'm going to take the Lawn Fawn Cloudy stencil and some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink and create a sky. So I'm starting at the top of the panel and just picking a cloud formation that I think is going to look nice, pressing down firmly with that ink blending tool right as I leave the stencil, and then lifting up and using lighter pressure as I go up the panel to help those clouds kind of fade and get a nice soft look. And then I just keep turning that stencil. You can also turn it to the back side to get new cloud formations as well. I ended up doing 4 different cloud variations, and then normally I add some ink down at the bottom, but this time I didn't bother because I knew that my grass was going to extend beyond where that bottom cloud was. But I did want to do a little splatter detail, so I'm pressing some of that ink onto an acrylic block, adding some water, mixing that up, and tapping it off the edge of the block to get a nice fine splatter. And then I'll set that aside to dry. I also trimmed down another of the same size panels and then cut the top off with the Hello Bluebird Grassy Knoll dies. And to color that, I'm going to use some Twisted Citron. I felt like this green went really well with the green in the pattern paper, so that's why I chose it. I'm going to add quite a bit of that at the top, and then I'm going to add in some mowed lawn down at the bottom just to darken that bottom edge up and create a little bit more interest. So I'm going to blend that on, and then I'll go back to the Twisted Citron and just work my way back and forth between those two until I have a look that I like and it's nice and smooth. And then I'll also do some splatter detail. I felt like there was something on that piece of paper, but it didn't come up, so it must have been maybe I dropped a little bit of water on it previously or something. I don't know. But I figured that the splatter detail would kind of incorporate it more into the scene so it wouldn't be nearly as noticeable. And also there's going to be images going over top of parts of this, so there's a good chance that it will get covered up in the final card anyway. So I wasn't going to worry about cutting out a new panel. I set that one aside to dry as well for about 10 minutes or so, and then it was time to glue these together. So I'm just using my Bearly Art Precision Craft Glue and then lining up the grooves down at the bottom and the two sides so that it's on there nice and straight. And then I'll pop that in my MISTI so that I can stamp out my sentiment. The sentiment that I'm using is from the Carried Away stamp set, and I'm doing that in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's a nice dark black ink that lays well over Distress Oxide ink, so it's usually my go-to for that. And I did stamp it down twice so it would be nice and bold. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI, which is Lawn Fawn's Ballet Slippers cardstock. I'm going to bring in the Banner Blessings stamp set from Hello Bluebird to do the sentiment on the inside. And then the images are from the Bloom and Grow stamp set. And I'm stamping those all in Lawn Fawn Bubblegum ink. There was a part in the center that wasn't quite stamped down right, so I just went ahead and inked that up a third time. And then I'm going to go back to that Happy Hearts pattern paper pad from Simple Stories and choose 2 more prints to go with this. I ended up using 2 scraps that were right in the front. I thought those matched really nicely with the floral print. So these are the 3 that I'm going to trim down. And then I can start assembling. So I'm going to take the diagonal stripe print first and adhere that to cover the entire front of my card. It's an A2 standard size card, so it's 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall. And then I'll run the floral print across the center of that panel horizontally, just kind of lining that up on the edges. And then I trimmed the polka dot print down into 2 thin strips, and I'm going to glue 1 at the top of the floral print and 1 down at the bottom. And I think that added a nice pop of that bright pink, which just really is going to help tie the whole card together. I added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, so I'll peel off those release papers, line that up in the center of my card, make sure it's on there nice and straight, and then press that down into place. And then I can bring in my images. I'm going to start with the tree because the tree is going to go in the background and have things glued over top of it. So I'm lining that up with the top edge on the right hand side of the card. And then I need to bring in the girl and the balloons because I wanted to make sure it looks like she's holding on to the strings that are gathered. So I had to get the placement of those just right on the card. And I took a little piece of foam tape because I knew that that top balloon was going to hang over the top of my focal panel. So I just positioned that and then added some liquid glue to the rest of the image and made sure that I got it behind all of those little strings as well. And then I'll use that girl once again as a placeholder to figure out where that balloon cluster should go exactly. And I ended up adding that foam tape just a little bit off from where it needed to be, so I moved that over so it was tucked behind that balloon. And then I was looking for the bottom of the balloon string, and I knew if I added it like lined up with the bottom of the cluster that it would hang over the P in the word up. So I glued it a little bit higher, and you won't be able to tell because it'll be hidden behind her hand once I add her over top. And then I just adjusted her. I didn't want her hat to cover up the little heart on the balloon that is right above her head. I didn't want her to cover it up completely, so I just moved her down slightly so you could see a little bit of that heart peeking out. And then I decided to go ahead and add in my 2 additional balloons. And I am going to pop those up with more foam tape. Normally I would not add 2 layers of foam tape on a card because it makes it so much harder to send through the mail. But with those balloons, I just thought the dimension was a no-brainer. It just needed it. So I went ahead and added a little bit of foam tape behind each of the 2 that I'm going to pop up and just line those up with the ones that they were right over top of. It was really easy to do. And since the balloons were already pop up, I thought I might as well pop up the bird as well because that would also add a little extra dimension to the card. So I'm going to add a little bit of foam tape behind that and then add that towards the top right between the tree and the balloon cluster. Then I added the little bow to her hat, and that's where I realized like it doesn't really look like it's made from the same material just because of the white outline of the die. So if I wanted it to look like it was part of the hat, I should have masked it off and stamped it right on the hat to begin with. But anyway, I still think it looks nice, but I think it would look even better if it were in a contrasting color because of that white outline. I also did go back and add a little grass to the bottom of my flowers just to incorporate them a little bit better into the scene. And then I'm going to layer those up in the space between the balloon string and the sentiment. So all that was left was to add a little bit of sparkle to this card. So I grabbed some Stardust Stickles and decided to add it to the shaded part of each of my balloons. And I also filled in the little heart completely on each of the ones that had it. So I thought about also adding it to the centers of the blue flowers, but decided that the balloons was enough. So I'm going to leave it at that. And that is going to finish this one up. So I will lift that up to the camera so you can see all of the detail and the sparkle and shine, and give you another peek at the inside. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had so much fun mixing and matching all of these different stamp sets and doing the pattern on her dress. I haven't done that in a while, and I do so enjoy it. If you did like it, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. I love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring your notification bell if you want to be alerted whenever I post a new video. All of the products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below, and I'll also put up 2 videos from previous years of Valentine Card Series in case you'd like to keep watching. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in another video. Bye-bye!